咁啊，我哋不如事不宜遲啦，我哋開始我哋今日咧第一個就係跨國嘅對談。I would like to invite the first speakers on stage, all the way from Boston, and I should have met him much earlier because I was in Harvard attending the Social Enterprise Conference in Harvard in February. And in Harvard, there's only one event that can put the Kennedy School and the Harvard Business School together. And this event is the Social Enterprise Conference. And this is the only time that the two schools would cooperate with each other. However, Nigel, as the keynote speaker, was not able to get into Harvard because the city encountered the once-in-a-century snowstorm. One-in-a-century snowstorm, right? 咁啊，佢入唔到去，因為太大雪啦。So I decided to, okay, all the way come to Hong Kong and speak to us. Thank you, Nigel. 咁啊，順便提一提啊嚇，今日我哋其實都係一個低碳嘅活動嚟嘅。我哋揾咗低碳亞洲有限公司咧，同我哋評估咗嗰個活動裏邊，成個活動裏邊嘅碳排放量啦，咁啊平衡咗我哋嘅碳排放。咁啊氣候變化，所以大家咧希望都能夠多啲關注翻環保嘅議題啦。咁啊 ，Nigel, stage is yours. Thank you. 香港嚟到香港，由美國波士頓市長辦公室 New Urban Mechanics 嚟到嘅聯合主席 Mr. Nigel Jacobs. Thank you.
This one, right?
Yep. Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for the conference organizers and to Secretary Lam for having me. I'm very proud to be here. Oops. This is Boston Mayor Thomas Menino, at least it was in 1994 when he was first elected. Here he is 20 years later, after 5 terms in office. He was given the nickname the urban mechanic because of his relentless focus on the classic issues that affect city living, making sure that schools graduate children on time, making sure that your neighborhoods are safe to walk in after dark, making sure that roads are smooth for driving on. And over those 20 years, he learned a thing or two about how cities work. And in particular, one thing that he learned was that the community, the city, was filled with would-be social entrepreneurs that are actively trying to connect with government to solve the issues that they see in their communities, issues of education reform, issues of building a sustainable economy. So we call this model in which social entrepreneurs are actively trying to work with government, we call that civic innovation or civic entrepreneurship. Now the problem for these people, for these civic entrepreneurs, is that very rarely in government is there anybody whose job it is to work with these people, to actually collaborate with them and develop the solutions that they're trying to build. So that's what we've done in Boston, and a number of other American cities are beginning to copy the same model. We call this model New Urban Mechanics, and New Urban Mechanics is a civic innovation incubator. And our job is really to connect innovators inside and outside of government to take on the hard problems that they see in their communities and to build real solutions to real problems. So this is the way it works. So on the left side there, you can see we cast a very wide net in how we try to bring people in and to collaborate with people. So these are people inside of government, outside of government. We get a huge range of people coming from all walks of life. On the one hand, we see a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs, people that are used to building things and delivering value to residents. And on the other hand, we see lots of private individuals, people that see the issues in their community and are trying to figure out, are devising ways to deal with them. They're all united by their focus on actual issues of quality of life in their communities. So we work then with these people, with these would-be civic entrepreneurs, to craft their pitches into experiments. So that's the middle. These experiments, we're very much about experimentation and developing a culture of learning at that intersection where the public meets the public sector. And so we're very focused on getting these pitches into a format that we can actually test in the communities. And so that's what the middle is. And then what we do is we'll run that experiment for some amount of time, for several weeks or several months, and then we'll assess it. We'll sit down with the entrepreneur and we'll assess it. Did this have the impact that we had hoped? If not, we try to shut them down as quickly as we can so that we're not sort of wasting resources. But if these things do work, then we spend our next chunk of time in working on how to scale the impact of these things. And because on the front end, we don't choose favorites in terms of the kinds of business models people have, for-profit versus non-profit. which in turn means that the scaling means different things to these different organizations. If it's a for-profit company, scaling could mean connecting them to a downstream VC, sort of private sources of private equity. If they're a nonprofit, it could be connecting them with philanthropic dollars. But all of these attempts at scaling are about scaling up their impact in the city and across cities. And ultimately, this is about managing the risk of this kind of innovation. So when I talk about developing a culture of learning, this isn't a metaphor for us. This is, I think, what we see as one of the missing pieces in this space. That there is a need to run these experiments, these social entrepreneurship ventures, but to be learning from them, and there needs to be somebody that can carry this learning across these experiments and to learn from them, so that at each new stage we're building on top of new knowledge. And in many ways, I think that government is positioned to be able to do exactly this. So we've been doing this, New Urban Mechanics. We've been running for 4 years. As I said, there's now an office in Philadelphia, in San Francisco, and Mexico City, and we're all beginning to do this work together. And I wanted to share a few of the things that we've learned in how to develop the field. The first is to be relevant. Now, this may seem obvious to you, but oftentimes what we find is when a civic entrepreneur or social entrepreneur comes to us, that they have a mental model as to what they think the problem is that they're trying to solve, and oftentimes they need work, they need collaboration from us to really understand the causative elements that they're seeing in the community, so they're not trying to solve a problem that really isn't there. This is an example of one of the social or civic entrepreneurs that we've worked with over the last several years. This woman is Marie Duggan. When she came to us, she was just a private individual, and her son there, Michael, is now 20 years old, but he's very far along the autism spectrum. And Marie had developed a series of ideas, well-formed ideas, as to how she could build mobile phone apps and tablet-based apps that would enable autistic young people and their parents to learn and grow. And so we were able to work with Marie to incubate her and her idea and to help her scale up and to run trials through the Boston Public School system. This is an example of the interface. The next sort of learning that we've garnered over the last many years is the need to collaborate deeply. I think oftentimes in the civic and social entrepreneurship world, there's an attempt to simply throw money at the problem, to give people grants and hope for the best. And I think that a lot of the social and civic entrepreneurs that we end up interacting with need more than just money. In fact, money may not be the first thing they need. They often need someone that can help them develop the idea and really understand develop an on-the-ground understanding as to how the issues actually work. So this is a project that we worked on with Boston Public School parents, the public school system, and an organization called Code for America. This is an example that if you're a Boston Public School parent, this is what you need to read to register your child in school. This is almost always a horrible experience for parents. And so as we were talking to these parents, it became loud and clear that what they want are better interfaces into the system. So we worked with Code for America to develop this platform called Discover Boston Public School, Discover BPS, and it's designed to change that moment of interaction that parents have with the school system, with the notion being that if we can change that first moment, that we'll be able to, we won't lose people as they kind of follow their children through the school system more generally. The last learning that we've discovered is that user experience is everything in this space. As it sort of hinted at with Discover BPS, the more that we can change people's first interaction with systems, the greater probability that we'll have to be able to keep them engaged so that we can enable systemic change more broadly. So, which means that we think in a very broad way about people's experiences of the city and city services and so on. And so as much as any city like Boston or like Hong Kong is trying to put their services online, of course we're trying to do that. But in talking to parents, to residents, one thing that we've heard is that they also have a strong need to interact interpersonally. And so what we've done is to build a truck, and so this was a project that came to us from an innovator inside local government, and the idea is to create this mobile truck. In the US, food trucks are all the rage, and so this is a truck that drives around the city, and you can access different services from this truck, everything from paying taxes to getting permits and so on. So it's a different way of thinking about how people can access services. This is an example of the menu. Usually you would have, this would be food if this was a food truck, but as you can see, you can access city services here. And so here's the sort of our three learnings together be relevant, collaborate deeply, user experience is everything. And often when we do these talks, we like to end on Jane Jacobs, who is also one of our inspirations, who said, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. And that's, I think, the promise that doing this work from cities like Hong Kong or Boston or London holds for the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nigel. As some of you may have remembered that there's a terrorist attack at the Boston Marathon, and you can see how strong the city is and how the city can bounce back very quickly. I've been talking to Nigel, and he said that the city just bounced back very quickly because of all these new initiatives after the attack. Thank you, Nigel. Our thoughts with Boston as well. And some of you may know that in addition to having the Home Affairs Bureau as our major sponsors for several years, this year we also have the Efficiency Unit to help us to think more about social innovation. And Nigel has been invited to the Efficiency Unit to share his experience as well. In addition, besides Nigel, Efficiency Unit also invite Rosemary Addis, which will be our second speaker. Rosemary, thank you. From Australia. Rosemary 未講之前咧，我想介紹下呢位仁兄。Rosemary, can you give me 1 minute? Nigel talks about graphic interface. Nigel talks about graphic interface. And this year, we decided to take notes graphically for the Social Enterprise Summit. 我哋咧就揾到來自深圳嘅莊延海，咁啊透過 Ada 嘅 Good Lab 咧，幫我哋揾到阿莊生過嚟。阿莊生，我哋不如將你呢個 board 褪過去嗰邊好嘛？ I like things on wheels. I mean, the Boston office is on wheels, and now we have a graphic interface on wheels. 未畫完㗎，呢個只係阿 Nigel。莊生啊，不如你過嚟呢邊繼續畫好嘛？好，我哋睇下佢一路點樣 drop notes 落去啊。All right, Rosemary, over to you. Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. And I'd like to acknowledge Secretary Lam and Dr. Jane Lee and the organising committee. And thank you very much for asking me to be part of this event. I'm delighted to be back in Hong Kong. So the focus of this year's summit is to bring in some policy discussion. So I thought it would be interesting to start with the Oxford Dictionary definition of policy as a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by an organisation or individual. Through a couple of twists and turns, we can trace this back through the Latin and Greek to concepts of citizenship. That's a great frame for social innovation, and I hope what I have to say will build on that fantastic presentation from Nigel. What if we ask ourselves questions that really go to the root of citizenship? What kind of community, country and world do we imagine? And what are we prepared to do to help achieve that? And in essence, taking up these challenges is the work of social innovation. To realise the potential, in my view, it's time that we move beyond some of the nice definitional questions of what's a social enterprise and the precise lines between social and economic innovation, and focus instead on what we need to do to create more opportunities for a whole range of approaches that can contribute benefit to society. I've had the privilege for the last 6 years of working in roles in government, and most recently in the Australian federal government, so a bit of a different view from Nigel's view from the city of Boston, of the federal government looking across the whole country. I'd like to talk to you today briefly about what we learned through having the opportunity to have a social innovation function in the federal government, and also what's the state of play in Australia. We learned that social innovation can be a great frame because it enables you to bring in process and products, and it's agnostic as to sector. It provides a great umbrella within which enterprise and entrepreneurship and markets and investment are the enablers, but not the end. We learned that designing our policy and program approaches with the question, to what end, could help create a focus on impact. And doing this, to have an impact. So with each thing that we did And remember, governments do things as well as create policy, which each thing we did, saying we're doing this to have transformational outcomes for communities experiencing disadvantage. We're doing this to help create catalysts for the market for social investments. And that meant that with each thing we did, we could also generate a new conversation. We took a pretty heterogeneous view to explore a broad range of approaches, from traditional grant funding to new models for incubation, from brokering connections with other sectors and adapting economic innovation policies for social issues. We learned that it was important to acknowledge that there are some pretty strong themes globally that are influencing the way that we live and work. And by looking to some of those global themes, we could help identify from the experience of others what works and what doesn't. In my view, government clearly has a role in social innovation. For government and policy makers, in my experience, creating better outcomes is the essence of the job. People take the concept of public service very seriously indeed. And innovation and enterprise are not a silver bullet, but they can in some cases offer an expanded toolbox, particularly if we look to start with those issues that have defied resolution through other approaches, sometimes generation after generation, or where the program limits are being reached and more money anytime soon isn't going to be the answer, or where there are policy opportunities that give us a space and an opportunity to actually look at doing something a bit different. Social innovation can help us look seriously at the commissioning of services and at accountability for results. And often it's about reorienting our focus or funding rather than about doing something new, perhaps adapting ideas from other sectors. And we learned that that can be very powerful. I'm also convinced that we need to develop a broader conception of the role of government than that of funder. As Nigel was talking about, government has distinctive roles in relation to policy and the law, but can also take on a variety of other roles that can help build collaboration. Roles like convener or facilitator, knowledge broker, and connector. Governments often know where the need is, often have valuable data and evidence, and sometimes not all the answers. So working across traditional boundaries can be really quite central, bringing new people, ideas and resources together to develop solutions. And we learned that by focusing on what we can do rather than some of the barriers, that we could create productive partnerships. And as Nigel reflected, that people were actually hungry to develop those relationships with government and know how to interact and intersect. Sometimes we were able to create non-traditional partnerships for social policy, including with investment banks and pension funds. We also learned that sometimes the opportunity is to help others work out how they can do more. Our convening and engagement strategies gave enough confidence for financial institutions to start their own social finance forum, and for a community to step up and co-fund with us initiatives that we hope will create different outcomes where they've been experiencing great disadvantage. We also learned that sometimes it's powerful for others to take the initiative in areas that can be genuinely difficult for government, like early intervention. And social impact bonds are developing, in part as a way that brings the contracting and financial incentives together to promote more of these kinds of approaches. We looked around the world and we actually found that there's some meaningful consistency in the approaches that have been taken to promote social innovation, and that the policy themes can be distilled into a few areas, and that helps us work out where to focus and also helps us see where others have gone before and what we can learn. Those policy approaches can be mapped across market dimensions, given that social innovation is often about employing market mechanisms for solving social issues. So we can look to supply, demand, the intermediation. They can be framed in terms of market failure, where we're looking through an economic lens, for example, recognising that the needs of social as much as other entrepreneurs are often met with information asymmetries. And there are some quick wins to be had, no doubt, in mitigating the demand and supply inefficiencies currently in the market by improving information flows, by supporting the development of market infrastructure, and by providing clearinghouse mechanisms and capacity building. And those policy options can also be mapped against this broader toolbox for government that I described. So what of the position in Australia? Social innovation's happening there. I'd love to tell you we've got it all sorted, But like everywhere else, we're still working it out. We're seeing a resurgence in cooperatives and community enterprise, and initiatives like the Centre for Social Innovation, Social Traders and a School for Social Entrepreneurs, which have been seed funded by government that's helped to get things off the ground. We've seen a range of initiatives, some based in policy and some led from the field, that are providing valuable lessons and showcasing potential and have built momentum. These range from tax incentives for affordable housing to new investment funds for social enterprise, social impact bonds, incubation projects, and demonstrating ways of working that can change the future for communities. The enabling environments also receive considerable attention, including from our leading economic advisory body, the Productivity Commission, and from our Senate. But there's not yet a clear policy framework at any level of government. So there are bright spots and there are challenges. And what we need now is to move from relative fragmentation to a more cohesive approach in the market. There's momentum building, but we still need leaders in Australia, like elsewhere, to step up and find ways to translate what is really growing interest into activity. We're looking for ways to team up to generate more ideas and products, to actually get things happening, because there's no substitute for doing. And we are looking for ways to speak up, to engage more people, and to actually build on the momentum that's there already, to get that ball rolling down the hill and really gain a whole new range of people who understand and can participate in social innovation, because that's how change will happen and these new markets will develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you very much. From Australia, we now go to the UK. Mr. Charles Lee Peter. Thank you. Coming up next is from Singapore. 我哋而家有請新加坡社會創新園創辦人兼主席劉夢琳女士 Penny, Social Innovation Park's founder from Singapore. Thank you. Over to you.
Well, when Charles was standing out here, I was getting a little bit worried. Just because if you could see his head a little bit more, those below may only see my eyebrows. A very good morning, Ms. Carrie Leung, Chief Secretary for Administration, Dr. Jane Lee, Chair Lady of this forum, and of course, her marvelous team. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a very good morning to you. Earlier on, when I was enjoying the concert, there was one line from the pop band that struck me. My Cantonese is not very good, but it says, did I do something to the screen? Sorry. But it says, 一班好知己說理想. I'm not sure how accurate that is. Thank you. And they call themselves Supper Movement, Supper Moment. And I thought to myself, maybe they should be called Serendipity Moment. Why is that so? Quite simply because we are all gathered in this hall for a united common cause. Whether we are from Australia, from UK, from US, from Singapore, or many other countries who are present here, we are all gathered in Hong Kong, thanks to the marvelous team here, for a better world. And indeed, I didn't know very much about the good movement here before I came, but indeed, I was so infected that even in my dreams, I brought along this. So, indeed, innovation for good. So the question then is, how and why is it that regardless of where we are from, we seem to be connected, so connected at this moment, at this time? And to that, I'll offer my own observations. The first, of course, is that the first observation is that prior to 2006, just about that time, IMF had a report it was a very unusual report that showed that most parts, if not all parts of the world, every single country was showing growth, positive economic growth. But yet, at that moment, we did not see a falling billion of those living below poverty line. At about the same time, there was this rage about a flattening world because the info communication technology has just come on and spread like wildfire, flattening the world, making knowledge, information far more accessible and even affordable to the common people, even those in the village. However, it has also unwittingly further marginalized those who are disabled, who are disadvantaged. Imagine a world where the visually impaired can pay their income tax online. Perhaps to us all, paying income tax online is nothing new and nothing to shout about. So why am I saying this? Well, I'm saying it because they don't have any income tax to be payable. But should it be a case where technology could not help them and empower them so that they too can become a net contributor? Obviously, there are ways, but it's putting technology to use where it matters, that really matters. The second observation is when we realize that many countries and many cities have become urbanized and wealthier on a per capita basis. When countries, cities become wealthier, by right, we should be able to take better care of ourselves individually. But yet, citizens seem to request more of their policymakers as they get wealthier. So the question then is, why did that happen? And indeed, I was very moved by Nigel's ending quote of Jane Jacobs, who then said that indeed a city or a countries or cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are indeed created by everybody. That's a rough quote. And I think this really underlines the sort of society that we want to create going forward. That it is one where we leverage on wealth, on technology to enable most people so that our approaches, our policies could be far more inclusive and everyone really prosper when the tide comes in. The second is that for that to happen, it is not the job of only the government or only the business or only the NGOs. It is the job of every single person. Some can do more, some can do less. The question is, how do we then build a society, not just in one part of the world or a city, but across the world, across cities, where everyone can become a net contributor? And I think policymakers have to think through how do we then create the incentive framework for that to happen. Because policymakers would really help the growth of this industry only if we start thinking about having a paradigm shift about how and what kind of society do we want to have, do we want our country to have. So as we move towards the next century or the next decade of growth, I hope that policymakers across the globe, including my own country and myself, putting on my policymaker's hat, would always remember that whatever we do it because of humanity, because we need to prosper our society. And in the case of Singapore, what we would do, very briefly, is quite much that kind of anchoring a citizen-centric policy where we could empower and enable whether it is individuals or groups, to move further. Not by having a top-down where the government is expected to do everything, but rather to become a facilitator of the citizens' ambitions. Whether it is the Ministry for Social and Family Development or any other ministries, my challenge to all policymakers is how do we ensure that even the Ministry of Home Affairs or the Ministry of Trade and Development could get in the act and make every citizen a contributing one. And my message to the business sector also is go beyond CSR. That's important. Keep doing that, but go beyond that so that we could also look at corporate responsibility in the light of being a corporate citizen. And for our NGOs, it is also important for us to realize that indeed there need to be a higher productivity level, increased innovation, so that we could all work together and understand each other's language in the tri-sector dialogue itself and prosper together. Last but not least, in the case of the Social Innovation Park, which was started in 2006, in pushing this movement itself, we hope to have the opportunity to collaborate with all of you to jointly build a more inclusive, sustainable, and better world through collaboration, partnership, and innovation with the private, public, and people sector. So to this end, I know that my time has run out, so I will end on the note saying that always believe that there is a lot that we can do together, and at the same time, never underestimate what a small group of people can do, for it is the only thing that changes the world. Quote, unquote, Margaret Mead, the great sociologist. So thank you very much for inviting me here, and I hope to be able to share more with you in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you very much. Next, we would like to have a very quick chat with the CS Chief Secretary and Dr. Jane Lee.阿 Jane 叫我都幫手傾下偈係嘛？或者如果大家內心有好多問題，我哋可以 hold 住一陣。We have a separate Q&A session after the dialogue. Jane， 頭先聽完，我見你係咁岌頭啦。你最岌得最勁係邊下咧？其實真係最入到心係邊下咧？真係。
即係知唔知咧？我以前即係讀書嘅時候咧，我個本行係讀 public policy 嗰陣時咧，我哋講緊80年代咧，就已經係話公共政策咧唔係政府淨係一個 provider， 要轉角色啦，要做 facilitator。但係咧20幾30年後咧，我先至發覺原來 social innovation 係個 solution， 係一個真真正正可以幫助咧政府改變角色嘅政策嘅一個嘅重要嘅一個嘅思維同埋方法。即係呢一個就係我當聽到佢哋講 catalyst、enabler 呢啲嘅語言嘅時候咧，我諗我就覺得係好似淨入咗個心咁。
催化劑係嘛？阿林太啊，咁阿 Jane 話佢催化劑呢樣嘢好入心啦。咁你覺得譬如喺成個社會裏邊，邊一樣嘢先係一個社會創新嘅催化劑咧？喺政府入邊啦，喺政府出邊啦，喺社企民間高峰會啊，定係應該點樣揾呢啲催化劑出嚟咧？其實可以。
我喺政府有30幾年嘅經驗啦，我都好坦白同大家講咧，如果要求嗰個 public sector 成為社會創新嘅推動者係有難度嘅嚇，因為public sector 好似差唔多與生俱來咧，有一種或者英文叫做 rigidity and inertia。我記得舊年喺2012嘅社企民間高峰會咧，我就好高興同大家宣布，行政長官喺7月16號講嘅，即係攞5億出嚟做一個社會企業嘅基金咧， 我哋咧就轉一轉腦筋咧，就將佢成為一個社會創新及企業發展嘅基金。咁但係其實一直係去到今年9月，9月先正式成立。咁我諗即係12個月去成立一個社創嘅基金咧，就係即係顯示咗我剛才講喺 public sector 裏邊咧，對於任何嘢好創新咧，都係有一種無名嘅恐懼啊，唔知會創下創咗去邊度。對於一啲唔係淨係同非牟利即係我哋所謂即係 IRD Section 88合作非牟利機構合作嘅工作咧，又係好擔心，即係會唔會走咗去牟利啊，或者甚至係官商勾結啊咁。咁所以我答你條問題咧，Vincent， 我覺得我哋真係要喺民間嘅智慧裏邊咧，去發掘呢種社創嘅精神。但係我都同意剛才其實4位講者，因為呢一節可能都係講政策啦，都係提到好多都係政府嘅功能public sector 嘅 role。咁我都好同意嘅。其實我哋真係有一個即係advocacy 嘅 role 啦。咁呢度我都或者可以講講喺過去1年呢，我哋喺政府裏邊都有做呢個 advocacy 嘅 role 嘅。例如我哋而家培訓公務員嘅同事啦，喺領袖培訓裏邊一環呢，都係講 social innovation。咁在座 Ada 咧都同我哋係做導師嘅。咁另外我哋亦都有一個 role 咧，就係頭先阿 Jane 都話佢好上心嘅，就係一個 facilitator 或者一個 enabler 嚇。咁呢度就係到社創有一啲工作或者同政府現行嘅政策係不吻合，政府嘅政策需要作稍微一啲動搖移動。我記得Diamond Cap Doris 喺度啊。佢都寫過俾我咧，就係佢唔係要求我即刻去改動，但佢話如果政府某一啲嘅運輸嘅政策可以有一啲嘅稍微嘅修訂咧，或許對於呢一類嘅社會創新嘅工作咧更加有利嘅。第3方面一定係 funder。I heard Nigel said that we should not just throw money at the problem, but money is still quite important 。咁所以我就好期望咧，呢個已經而家正式成立喺張銀良教授領導之下嘅社會創新及企業發展基金咧，能夠做到呢個政府提供資源嘅一個角色嚇。但最終咧嗰個創新嘅精神真係要嚟自民間，嚟自我哋嘅公民社會。咁希望在座每一位長期支持社企民間高峰會咧，呢個時候係你發光發熱嘅時候啦。
Jane 同我今朝傾嘅時候咧，有樣嘢我哋啱啱同你頭先講嗰樣有關係嘅司長，就係其實好多時候政策定咗啦，或者資金定咗啦，但係除咗由上而下之外，由下而上啲橋要出嚟，要有計仔啊，喺唔同嘅 community 喺地區要出到啲橋出嚟咧，其實都係需要去發掘、去揾或者去鼓勵嘅。咁譬如由下而上，你咁多年嘅經驗，成日落區啊，成日見到好多市民，點樣可以令到由下而上呢個過程都可以快啲呢？頭先你講咗由上而下啦，即係政府有幾個唔同嘅角色，世界各地嘅人都分享咗由上而下點做，由下而上可以又點樣做翻快啲呢？我哋又可以點樣做翻多啲呢？民間嚟講，
我諗一定係要有一個critical mass 嚇。我覺得個別去做社會創新嘅工作可能有一啲嘅難度。咁所以點解我都好支持阿 Jane 同埋各位委員會咧，多年嚟喺社企民間高峰會嘅工作咧，就一定話今日在座800人係咪啊？即係見到呢個嘅高峰會咧，每一年都喺度成長，就係話俾我聽咧，其實呢個 critical mass 咧已經喺度即係建立緊。換句話説咧，我哋離開嗰個 ecosystem 嗰個生態嘅系統都唔係好遠啦。我覺得咧都係要有呢個生態嘅系統，然後再有一啲土壤啦，再有一啲fertilizer 啦，咁就可以出到呢種由下而上嚟到幫助我哋即係推動政策或者係提供公共服務。喺呢度我特別想回應幾句咧，關於Charles 提到咧，其實public sector 同埋social innovation 或者 social entrepreneurs 咧係有唔同嘅形式可以合作嘅。恐怕有啲咧係比較難，譬如佢話可以 in-source critical component 咧，呢個 I'm sorry this is going to be quite difficult in the Hong Kong context or indeed in most government contexts because of the characteristics of public sector that I've just mentioned, the rigidity and inertia, the fear and so on and so on. But outsourcing to social enterprises has been something that we have adopted for years. Indeed, I would say that many of the subvented social welfare services that we're now seeing in supported employment, in integrated education, were the original social innovation ideas of just individuals. They started, they grow, and then the government came in to enable them to expand, to scale up, and so on. Another form which is quite common, and I see a lot of potential, is for the social to complement the public. I have seen wonderful examples recently in how social innovation, and by the way, initiated and executed by the private sector, has complemented formal education. We all know that there's a limitation to how the formal education, the school sector, could help children, particularly from disadvantaged background, in terms of after-school care, tutorial, exposure, mentorship, and so on. So I have recently seen 2 wonderful private sector projects. I'm sure many of you have heard about it. This project, We Can, 學校起動, supporting Band 3 schools. And another one, perhaps less heard of, is what is called 333 Companion Education Leadership Program, targeting primary schools, mobilizing schools who are willing to open up their school premises after school hours to enable kids from other schools, from another 20 schools, to gather together to do after-school care work and so on. So I agree entirely with Penny that we should really encourage businesses to go beyond CSR, to roll up their sleeves and use both money and their staff to actually demonstrate things that they are very good at, that is entrepreneurship, which is the driving force for business growth, for a social cause. So I'm actually very, very inspired and very impressed recently, because I'm spending more time on social innovation, and I'm seeing very good work being done in the private sector, in the NGO sector. So I hope that with Efficiency Unit and Stephen Zheng overseeing the Social Innovation Fund, we will be able to play our part in encouraging the development of social innovation in Hong Kong.
A lot of
即
the
我試下回
initiatives.
應下司
好啊，
長。
好啊。
即係其實我上一次同阿司長傾嘅時候咧，佢對於講 ecosystem 有啲 uneasy 嘅。但係今日咧，我發覺佢竟然講得好自然。
阿 Jane，你啲係咪爆料嚟㗎？其實係咪？
啊！呢個爆料嚟嘅，我諗佢唔介意我爆料。咁其實我都想回應下呢度嘅。其實司長，我哋即係而家咧都睇到呢幾年嗰個運動咧，學界咧在座都有好幾位一班大學嘅教授，佢哋已經喺大學裏邊咧一路推動緊 social innovation 嘅 program。咁而喺 NGO 界咧，我相信咧我都好多同事喺度，佢哋都承認咧，俾我即係都推到傻傻地。但係即係都係知道咧，大家都係認同咧，即係社會創新咧係我哋即係要走嘅方向。商界亦都係，我哋今日有好多商界嘅朋友。其實咧，我頭先覺得有一個好重要咧，就係我哋如果係能夠從第二個界別嗰個角度去諗人哋點解嗰樣嘢係可以做到，或者點解嗰樣嘢對我嗰個界別可以用一個會唔會另一個 approach 去做呢？咁呢個跨界別嗰個嘅思維同埋嗰個合作呢，就會更多火花。咁我哋今日見到阿 Vincent 嗰4個碌嗰個 solution on wheel 喺 Vincent 個社企呢，都即係好有趣啦，係咪？即係周圍去。咁我就想問下司長，我哋都知道 Nigel 有一架咁嘅碌㗎。喺個 Boston 咧，佢 bring the city hall to the cities to the general public。我哋香港又可唔可以做一啲將4隻碌嘅 public service， 即係變成咗4隻碌，帶去我哋啲社區呢？有冇咁嘅機會啊？
某程度上其實我哋有嘅，你記唔記得我哋社福界最中意講啦 ，Meals on Wheel 係咪？我哋提供膳食服務上門啦，因為我哋都係好支持長者咧應該居家安老。咁我哋亦都有 mobile libraries 啦，但係你話要去到一個 one stop，I think Nigel's the case in Boston, the beauty of it, it is one stop. It is not just confined to one single department's public services, but a range of public services provided by the city government to its citizens. 我喺呢度賣個關子啦，但係我哋真係諗緊啲又唔可以係咁全面，但係真係諗緊一啲方法。點樣可以將我哋一啲服務咧係更加可以以外展嘅手法啦 ，outreaching mode to bring to the people 嚇。咁但係或者我喺呢度頭先我都聽到阿 Jane 話最好點樣易地而處係嘛？從人哋嘅角度諗諗。 咁所以當我剛才講咗話，即係公營部門有佢嘅僵化嘅制度，令到有啲嘢唔會發生。我希望在座每一位咧，都從公營部門嘅角度咧諗一諗，因為今日咧公營部門都面對好多嘅壓力，係嘛？亦都有好多嘅監察嘅工作嚇，亦都有立法會嘅要督導我哋嚇。咁所以即係公營部門裏邊嘅同事，儘管每一個人每一個人其實都想創新，都想去改善佢做緊嘅工作嘅方法，都想好啲去解決社會問題，但係都係有一啲即係掣肘喺度嚇。咁所以希望第二次大家如果有一啲great ideas，去揾一個政府部門，佢頭一兩次話呢樣嘢做唔到嘅嚇。你要明白佢嘅處境，但係我都會提議大家唔好放棄嚇，一定要永不言棄永不言敗，繼續嘗試，好嗎？
Well, actually, the government officials has been the fastest increasing sector in participating in the Social Enterprise Summit. So we have more and more government officials to join in. And actually, I have tried to call legislators to come, and only just President are coming today. And all the legislators told me that they're quite busy. So I think we have a long road to go as well. 大家幫下手叫你哋啲議員嚟聽下社企民間高峰會，佢哋都需要社會創新嘅，佢哋都係民意代表嚟㗎。I think we would like to reserve some time for the Q&A, but can I ask one more questions to the CS and also to the chair? How should we tackle barriers to innovation? It could be the system, it could be rigidity, it could be stereotypes, it could be inertia, it could be criticism. It could be the media. How should we adjust our psychological state, or how should we work really hard to overcome such barriers?
I think the best way is really to conduct experiments. I think it was mentioned by Nigel. We actually demonstrate by doing experiments and show people that an idea works. And an idea will help us to better society and help solve some problems. And then once it has been demonstrated to be an effective solution, then we consider the scaling up or the replication. But if one tries to be very ambitious and start on a big scale, that is not going to be very helpful, because that would only mean that people will be even more fearful of that sort of changes of great magnitude. So I do encourage again that people, organizations who have good ideas, don't be too ambitious, but actually first demonstrate. Demonstrate to people in society and demonstrate to the public servants that this idea does work. And then we could sit down to talk about the scaling up and the replication.
Dr. Lee?
我覺得有兩點咧可以考慮嘅，一個咧就係頭先各位講者都有講嘅 ，civic behaviour produces public good。即係我哋咧各個在座嘅朋友其實都有一個責任咧，係同政府 work together。當然政府又有責任去 work with 啲市民，就大家令到咧即係一齊 deliver 個 public good。我諗呢個即係社會創新嗰個方向係咁。第二個咧，我自己就即係呢2、3年感受好深，特別我而家做咗個好廚房咧，我仲更加感受深咧，就係原來咧 consumer behaviour 係 drive business decisions。因為我哋咧發覺原來有一啲飲食界嘅朋友咧，都走嚟我哋嗰度討論講飲講食講管理。咁個原因咧就係點解飲食界都可以做社企咧？咁即係話咧，如果我哋嘅消費者咧係去支持多啲責任消費、良心消費，多啲去支持社企咧，我相信就會更加多嘅跨國企業咧就投資落社企。咁我哋就解決好多 barrier。
我諗頭先司長或者Jane 講咗好多嘅計劃咧，好多嘅實驗咧，其實都係喺社區度發生嘅。I think a lot of this new initiative, these social experiments, these pilots are actually from community base. So I think the community would be a very rich bed to try out new things. And I think all of you here, after today and after tomorrow, please go back to your community and try out new things. 希望你哋咁多位今日聽完之後唔好淨係做海綿啊，個海綿唔該放翻出去，將你哋今日吸收到嘅嘢咧，同其他人講，喺社區嗰個層次度講，同唔應該淨係呢800人，唔應該淨係喺 CGO 喺政府總部嘅人去諗社會創新嘅，社會創新係社會行先嘅， 係社會為主嘅，係地區為主嘅。咁所以我諗好多嘢希望可以同啲用家講啊，同其他人講。我諗呢個今日都係我其中一個好入心嘅講法啦。我知道不如有冇多一句補充 for today? Jane, CS, anything to encourage us?鼓勵下我哋嘅。
如果各位呢想即係知道多啲社企界嘅新故事，啱啱呢本書呢，
你賣廣告啊 ，Jane？
即係講廣告。頭先呢啱啱開場前1分鐘到場嘅呢本書，真係新鮮熱辣，就叫做《我們可以改變世界》第3集。
OK。
如果你買3本，100蚊就搞掂。
That's very entrepreneurial. The Chief Secretary。
我非常之喜歡今年嘅社企民間高峰會嗰個主題啊，創新於善嚇。正如阿 Jane 講咧，喺英文good 係可以解善，可以解好。其實有陣時佢仲可以解一個係一個比較即係終極嘅方法。譬如你見到啲朋友喺外國生活咗好耐，而家翻嚟香港，你係咪 Are you coming back for good 咁嚇？咁我好高興聽到佢哋話係啊 for good 所以希望大家繼續努力。
多謝 CS， 多謝阿 Jane。好。All right, can I invite our foreign speakers to come back on stage and join Dr. Jane Lee for a polylogue? And let's put our hands together for the Chief Secretary again. Thank you for coming. As some of you might know, it is quite rare for the Chief Secretary to stay for all 4 speakers and have a dialogue that long. So really appreciate it. And it is all of you and all your passion that makes this happen. Thank you again.